My name is Dan Gjelten. I'm director of O'Shaughnessy Frye Library, and I'd like to welcome you to the second annual Poetry on the Patio at the University of St. Thomas. As I said last year, our dream is that someday this whole quad will be full of people, and we're going to have a huge poetry jam, and that's a few years off, I guess. But it looks better than it did last year. We've got real patio furniture, and I'd like to thank those of you who volunteered your lawn furniture for that. This is the 5th annual National Poetry Month. One of the features of Poetry Month, one of the favorite features of it, has become the Favorite Poem Project. And the Favorite Poem Project was the brainchild of Robert Pinsky, who is our current poet laureate. He's been poet laureate for the United States for 3 years now. I think he's the longest, the person that's been in that office the longest. And I just wanted to say a couple words about the Favorite Poetry Project here for those of you who might not be familiar with it. Pinsky, a couple of years ago, asked Americans to submit their favorite poems to his office at Boston University. I'm going to be reading some things here from the Washington Post of April 3rd, 2000 about this project. He asked Americans to submit their favorite poems to his office at Boston University, and he began giving readings across the country to drum up support for this project. The premise was, of course, that Americans really did have favorite poems. I was not so sure whether it would work out or not, Pinsky said. In fact, it really did work out, and 18,000 Americans sent their suggestions in to him, and it has resulted now in a collection of poems that was published last fall, and a video that also came out last fall showing a few of the people who submitted their poems reading their poetry. The author goes on to say, there's something extraordinary about watching people read poems out loud. There's the potency of the personal connection, as well as the benefits of inflection, facial expression, and the like. A good reader decrypts a poem. He gets it, and he explains it with his voice. You're witnessing somebody experience a work of art in that person's own voice, Pinsky says. Lovers of poetry know a poem's visceral appeal is as important as its technical correctness, the way that some sculptures are ugly and others draw you in long before you interpret them. Despite the separation of years and lifestyles between poet and reader, poetry is immediate. It gives unabashed access to feeling and idea. So people who might never meet on the sidewalk nevertheless talk through this vessel. Seth Rodney, a photographer from Long Beach, California, says the poem he loves, Nick and the Candlestick, was written by someone far different from him. Sylvia Plath was a somewhat privileged white New Englander. Rodney is an immigrant from Jamaica. You could hardly pick two people in the world more distant, he says. She spoke to me. She spoke to me. She spoke, it seems, directly to my life. Then he closes his eyes to call up the poem from memory. He recites it so intensely you feel almost ashamed, as if you should not be snooping on feelings so strong and private. I think that beautifully describes what reading poetry is all about. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We've got a list. I hope everybody has a copy, particularly you readers, have a copy of this list of the order of the poems that we're going to do today, because this is the way the system is going to work. I would like you to get up here in turn and introduce yourself, and then tell us just a little bit about this poem that you're going to read and why it's special to you. And I'm going to start. And the poem I'm going to read today is by Mark Strand, who was actually also poet laureate back in 1990. And this book was published that year. The name of the book is The Continuous Life, and this is the title poem from the book. And I like this because I think it so lovingly describes the kind of lives that many of us lead, which don't seem to be particularly dramatic. The Continuous Life. What of the neighborhood homes, awash in the silver light, of children crouched in the bushes, watching the grown-ups for signs of surrender, signs that the irregular pleasures of moving from day to day, of being adrift on the swell of duty, have run their course. O parents, confess to your little ones the night is a long way off, and your taste for the mundane grows. Tell them your worship of household chores has barely begun. Describe the beauty of shovels and rakes, brooms and mops. Say there will always be cooking and cleaning to do, that one thing leads to another, which leads to another. Explain that you live between two great darks, the first with an ending, the second without one. That the luckiest thing is having been born, that you live in a blur of hours and days, months and years, and believe it has meaning, despite the occasional fear you are slipping away with nothing completed, nothing to prove you existed. Tell the children to come inside, that your search goes on for something you lost, a name, a family album that fell from its own small matter into another, a piece of the dark that might have been yours. You don't really know. Say that each of you tries to keep busy, learning to lean down close and hear the careless breathing of earth and feel its available languor come over you, wave after wave, sending small tremors of love through your brief, undeniable selves into your days and beyond. And now it's time for Michael Hofmeister, who I do not know, but I hope he's here.
I'm going to read one of my own poems. It's called My Lover's Bed. I have found another world, I have, and this world takes shape in my lover's bed. It ends not there, however, for the genesis of all things must start with a revealing end, and her bed is a revelation of ships on seas. So it takes its form, and I lay like a virgin upon white billows of sky. My comfort is derived in the fact that this night she will, and the previous night she did, and all nights hitherto she laid here in prophetic repose. Oh, perfume is one thing, but scented emotions is another. They fill the air, and I swallow them selfishly. It's nice not having any pirates to contend with, and no seagulls circling the silent ship, and no whipping of the wind's wall at my back. The sea is particularly inviting this day, and is as calm as a cradle. And so I sail, fingers first, of course. They shall steer, because they have experienced foreign lands before. They have walked over and under, around, and sailed softly up and down, and I must admit they are very brave indeed. I hesitate, however, in complimenting their bravery, and I cannot speak of them as individuals, even though they are individually self-indulgent, each one wanting this and that again. Together, however, they can and have climbed mountains. I shall send 5 first, I think. Well, perhaps I should send all 10. No, I will send 5 and let them feel, on their calloused feet, the ultimate sensuousness which is exclusive to land so curvaceously carved, that the sea sleeps sound, until having assessed the impatient lapsing, the land sway sets it in motion once again. Then, after the sea shore is satisfied, and my first explorers need assistance, I shall send the other 5, and together they will seize every watery and land-bound treasure. They shall slide down plush valleys where birds of prey are prey of birds, and tumble over the waterfalls of wintry fever. They will climb the mountain which, having no regard for nature's hierarchy, pierces through the summer solstice sun, and together they will endure any fiery travail until they have reached higher than they ever have before. And when they have reached the summit, they must rest a while. The falling action thereof is a stilled and hushed celebration, and is as soft and as silent as our ship and our sea. Rest, my brave soldiers, for explorations abound in my lover's bed.
This poem is called Snow White and the Seven Deadly Sins by R.S. Gwynn. I came across it in high school in one of my English classes, and it's an interesting take on the story of Snow White, and I hope I don't offend anyone with this one. Good Catholic girl, she didn't mind the cleaning. All of her household chores at first were small and hardly labors one could find demeaning. One's duty was one's refuge, after all. And if she had her doubts at certain moments, and once confessed them to the Father, she was instantly referred to texts in Romans and Peter's first epistle, chapter 3. Years passed. More sinful every day, the 7 breakfasted, grabbed their pitchforks, donned their horns, and sped to contravene the hopes of heaven, sowing the neighbor's lawn with tares and thorns. She set to work. Pride's walls of looking-glasses ogled her, dimly smeared with prints of lips. Less magazine lay strewn. Bare tits and asses waited by his devices, chains, cuffs, whips. Gluttony's empties covered half the table, mingling with avarice's cards and chips. And she'd been told to sew a Bill Blast label inside the blazer Envied bought at Gyp's. She knelt to the cold master bathroom floor as if a petitioner before the Pope, retrieving several pairs of sloth-soiled drawers, a sweat sock, and a cake of hairy soap. Then, as she wiped the Windex from the mirror, she noticed, and the vision made her cry, how much she had grayed and paled, and how much clearer festered the bruise of wrath beneath her eyes. No poison apple needed for this princess, she murmured, making X's with her thumb. A car door slam, bring her to her senses. Ho hum, it's home from work we come. And she was out the window in a second, in time to see a handsome prince, of course, who, spying her distressed condition, beckoned for her to mount, what else, his snow-white horse. Impeccably he spoke. His smile was glowing, so debonair, so charming, and so male. She took a step, reversed, and without slowing, beat it to St. Anne's, where she took the veil.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Hubert Walczak. I taught mathematics at St. Thomas from 1963 to 1995. And just to clue you in on what a retired math prof thinks about, I observed that with 16 of us reading, if we want to finish in about an hour, that gives us 3 minutes and 45 seconds each. And I'll try to do my part. And I also note that John Davenport is reading a poem by the great poet W.B. Yeats, following me. And the poem that I've chosen is related to Yeats and to my favorite poet, W.H. Auden. Some time ago at a college social gathering, a former student told me he remembered a summer session course that he took from me in mathematics years before. And I should have shut my mouth right then, but unfortunately I said, well, what do you remember about it, Tim? And he said, well, I remember that one night you read us a poem by W.H. Auden. So much for opening your mouth at the wrong time. I actually came close to choosing an Auden poem for today, but the poem was in memory of W.B. Yeats, a wonderful elegy, but it didn't seem in keeping with the conditions around us. So the poem contains the line, and I quote it, "Poetry makes nothing happen." I've got a counterexample of that. Back in the 1960s, I was watching a TV show that was a poetry reading. How long since you've seen a poetry reading on television? Anyway, one of the readers was the fine actor James Whitmore, and one of the poems he read was Morning Worship by Mark Van Doren. I didn't know the title when he read it, but its immediacy and the excellence of his reading made something happen. I went out and bought the collected poems of Mark Van Doren the next day. So the poem was published in 1960, and Van Doren won the Pulitzer Prize in 1940. Morning Worship by Mark Van Doren. I wake and hear it raining. Were I dead, what would I give lazily to lie here like this and live? Or better yet, birdsong brightening and spreading, how far would I come then to be at the world's wedding? Now that I lie, though, listening, living, oh, but not forever, O end arriving, how shall I praise them, all the sweet beings eternally that outlive me and my dying? Mountains, I mean, wind, water, air, grass and huge trees, clouds, flowers, and thunder and night. Turtles, I mean, and toads, hawks, herons, owls, graveyards, and towns and trout, roads, gardens, red berries, and deer. Lightning, I mean, and eagles, fences, snow, sunrise, and ferns, waterfalls, serpents, green islands, and sleep. Horses, I mean, butterflies, whales, mosses, and stars, and gravelly rivers and fruit. Oceans, I mean, black valleys, corn, brambles, and cliffs, rock, dirt, dust, ice, and warnings of flood. How shall I name them and in what order? Each would be first, omission is murder. Maidens, I mean, and apples, needles, leaves, worms, and planets, and clover, whirlwinds, dew, bulls, geese. Stop, lie still, you will never be done. Leave them all there, old lover, live on. And I hate to conclude with a practicality, but if you want the poem, it's online at your favorite website. Mine is alltheweb.com. Just hit Mark Van Doren. You'll get 6,000 hits, most of which are unusable, or morning worship. Thank you.
I've wanted to read this poem on St. Patrick's Day for at least 3 years, and have always been excluded from doing this. And so now a delayed reading of a poem from St. Patrick's Day, the Municipal Gallery revisited by Yeats. Around me the images of 30 years, in ambush, pilgrims at the waterside, casement on trial, half hidden by the bars, guarded, Griffith staring in hysterical pride, Kevin O'Higgins' countenance that wears a gentle, questioning look that cannot hide a soul incapable of remorse or rest, a revolutionary soldier kneeling to be blessed, an abbot or archbishop with an upraised hand blessing the tricolor. This is not, I say, the dead Ireland of my youth, but an Ireland the poets have imagined, terrible and gay. Before a woman's portrait, suddenly I stand, beautiful and gentle in her Venetian way. I met her all but 50 years ago for 20 minutes in some studio. Heart smitten with emotion, I sink down, my heart recovering with covered eyes. Wherever I had looked upon my permanent or impermanent images. Augusta Gregory's son, her sister's son, Hugh Lane, only begetter of all these. Hazel Lavery, living and dying, that tale as though some ballad singer had sung it all. Mancini's portrait of Augusta Gregory, greatest since Rembrandt, according to John Synge, a great ebullient portrait certainly, but where is the brush that could show anything of all that pride and that humility? And I am in despair of that time may bring approved patterns of women or of men, but not that self-same excellence again. My medieval knees lack health until they bend, but in that woman, in that household where honor had lived so long, all lacking found. Childless, I thought, my children may find here deep-rooted things, but never foresaw its end. And now that end has come, and I have not wept. No fox can foul the lair the badger swept. An image out of Spenser, and the common tongue. John Synge, I and Augusta Gregory thought all that we did, all that we said or sang must come from contact with the soil. From that contact, everything in Tyus-like grew strong. We three alone in modern times had brought everything down to that soul test again. Dream of the noble and the bigger man. And here's John Synge himself, that rooted man, forgetting human words, a grave, deep face. You that would judge me, do not judge alone this book or that. Come to this hallowed place where my friends' portraits hang and look thereon. Ireland's history and their lineaments trace. Think where man's glory most begins and ends, and say my glory was that I had such friends.
Hi, I'm Gayle Lamb, and if you don't know me, you probably see me in the grill quite a bit. I'm going to read an original work that was done by some people in my neighborhood, which is Powderhorn Park neighborhood over in the city of Minneapolis. And this poem was written by Jeannie Picos, and the art is done by Janice Lee Porter. And I'll show you a picture of it, and it's titled Faith, and then I'll read this. I want so much to walk with you into my vision, where there is joy at just the sight of you, and only humor for our follies. Oh, come, let us be faithful. I want to walk with you as we set aside our suffering and gaze unflinching into the face of God, which is housed here in one another. Let us be joyful and triumphant. I want to walk with you through this season of renewal, going darkly, bravely into our own depths to find our own answers. Sing in exultation. I want to walk with you into a year never before experienced and fully live our lives 1 year closer to perfection. For we are born of angels. By Jeannie Picos. And this is going to be a gift for the library, and I hope they can find an appropriate spot for that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Draine. I'm a junior at St. Thomas, and I have 2 poems, very short and quick. Sometimes short poems are good because you can memorize them and pass them on. The first one has never been written anywhere. It's just been in my mind. It's kind of it's my own poem. And so I'll say it. It's only 3 lines, and then try to explain it. It's called Circus. A bear on a ball, a white bear, a black ball. And that may sound kind of dumb to many of you, but if you think about it, it gives you an image in your head, and the colors black and white are significant. And I guess I don't want to explain it any further because it can leave you to give you your own meaning. If you'd like, you can ask me about it, but I will go on to the next poem. And this one was told to me by a teammate, my cross-country teammate, and the author is unknown, and it's called A Grain of Sand. To see the world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wildflower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand, or eternity in an hour. And that's another short poem, so that might be able to be memorized and passed on to your children. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Haley, and I'm a librarian, and I have chosen a poem by a name that's very difficult to pronounce, but I'll do my best. Her name is Tosaki Shange. She's an African-American contemporary woman poet who lives in Houston now. She teaches drama at the University of Houston. You probably know her for her play, which is for colored girls who have considered suicide When the Rainbow is Enough, won an Obie Award several years ago. I chose a poem from her collection called Ridin' the Moon in Texas, Word Paintings. And in this book, she's taken paintings, which you probably can't see too well, but she's taken paintings and she's written a poem about them. This one is called Who Needs a Heart? And I chose it because I think it's just a beautiful story about a very difficult subject, which is very, very powerful. Who needs a heart? Somewhere in Soweto, there's a small girl. She's brown, thin, and frightened. She eats cardboard sometimes. She's hungry. And she makes believe it's bread and meat, warm meat with butter and salt between 2 slices of bread. She's 4 years old. She eats grass sometimes. She's hungry. Cows eat grass, so do goats. She thinks she's an animal. There's no one around to hold her, call her name. Tell her a story like Rose Red and Rose White. Or maybe someone already told her about Rose White. And so at 4, she's decided it's better to be a 4-legged creature than the kind that stand on 2 legs with cattle prods and rifles, terrifying children and disgracing all of us. Who can stand on our own 2 feet, watching apartheid as if it were another all-night movie. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ted Litzner. I work at the Minneapolis campus for the physical plant. And my poetry is, on the average, quite short, so I won't keep you too long. I like to keep it short, to keep it in people's minds. And like the young gentleman said earlier, it's easier to remember. My first one is called Summer Sand, and I wrote this after several experiences of being down in Florida at a younger age. And second one listed as Autumn, but I have changed my mind and I'm reading something else that's untitled. So I'm going to read Summer Sand first. I watched the summer sand rise in this, excuse me, easy to remember, that's why I'm reading it off the paper. I watched the summer sun rise in the sky, straining golden rays through royal palms, and felt the warm sand melt beneath my feet. I watched as the sand slid up and down with each surging and retreating wave. Then I sat and watched the blushing sun melt beneath the blue horizon. Where has the music in my heart gone? Why can't the magic in my words turn to song? Where do the feelings go when they're not within? Is my heart now dry? Has my free spirit become a prisoner of my own doubts? My fears are many. The times of inspired wit have become fragments of long-forgotten dreams. Oh, to dance on the moonbeams once more, to take flight in an everlasting journey. That was written when I thought I was kind of running out of material. Obviously not. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Hyland. I'm going to read a poem today by Sharon Olds titled The Race. And this is a poem from her book of poems called The Father, which is a series of poems chronicling her father's illness and death and then beyond her death. And I think that it's amazing that she was able to write a whole book on such a centered subject. And this is a poem that I admire for the energy that she manages to put into such an ordinary topic as death, which we all experience. The Race. When I got to the airport, I rushed up to the desk, bought a ticket. 10 minutes later, they told me the flight was canceled. The doctors had said my father would not live through the night, and the flight was canceled. A young man with a dark blonde mustache told me another airline had a nonstop leaving in 7 minutes. See that elevator over there? Well, go down to the first floor, make a right. You'll see a yellow bus. Get off at the second Pan Am terminal. I ran. I, who have no sense of direction, raced exactly where he'd told me, a fish slipping upstream deftly against the flow of the river. I jumped off that bus with those bags I had thrown everything into in 5 minutes and ran. The bags wagged me from side to side as if to prove I was under the claims of the material. I ran up to a man with a white flower on his breast. I, who always go to the end of the line, I said, "Help me." He looked at my ticket. He said, "Make a left and then a right. Go up the moving stairs and then run." I lumbered up the moving stairs. At the top, I saw the corridor, and then I took a deep breath. I said goodbye to my body, goodbye to comfort. I used my legs and heart as if I would gladly use them up for this, to touch him again in this life. I ran, and the bags banged me, wheeled and coursed in skewed orbits. I have seen pictures of women running, their belongings tied in scarves, grasped in their fists. I blessed my long legs he gave me. My strong heart I abandoned to its own purpose. I ran to gate 17, and they were just lifting the thick white lozenge of the door to fit it into the socket of the plane. Like the one who was not too rich, I turned sideways and slipped through the needle's eye, and then I walked down the aisle toward my father. The jet was full, and people's hair was shining. They were smiling. The interior of the plane was filled with a mist of gold endorphin light. I wept as people weep when they enter heaven, in massive relief. We lifted up gently from one tip of the continent and did not stop until we sat down lightly on the other edge. I walked into his room and watched his chest rise slowly and sink again. All night, I watched him breathe.
Hi, my name is Lee Bonta. I work in the development department here at St. Thomas, and I'm from Ohio. That's important because the poem I'm reading is by Fred Eckman called To Sherwood Anderson in Heaven. Fred Eckman was a fine poet and a gentle soul who taught creative writing at Bowling Green State University, where I got my undergraduate degree, and he believed Sherwood Anderson to be one of the best writers to have ever come from Ohio. You probably recall he was the author of Winesburg, Ohio, which most people acknowledge to be about his hometown of Clyde, Ohio. So from Fred Eckman to Sherwood Anderson in Heaven. Last September, on the road to Sandusky, I counted blackbirds, flocks of them, whistling and flapping in the harvest fields under that gold Indian summer sky which you must still remember 20 years now in heaven. My father, driving the car, talked of crops and weather, keeping his eye on the white line. He did not appear to notice the blackbirds, but then he is 70 years old. His eyes, turned mostly backward into a past that you, Sherwood, gave a kind of gloomy immortality. I disturb my father. He does not understand who or what I am. A happy lunatic, a poet, a bear-like man with a beard, a cloud watcher, a shameless sensualist, eating, drinking, talking, reading, laughing, cursing, weeping, smoking, all too much. Lover of flowers and small children, an eye for the women, a stylist, a tragic clown, incurable romancer from my earliest days. My father, austere, silent, ascetic, almost a Roman, must wonder where I came from. Surely not, he thinks, from these lean loins. So anyway, when we reached Fremont, we found the highway under construction. Yes, Sherwood, they are still at it up there. Progress, progress. We'll have to detour through Clyde, Father said. Pretending not to remember, I asked him what kind of town Clyde was. Oh, a nice little place, he said. Somehow I was hoping he'd add, Sherwood Anderson used to live there. Then we could have talked about you all the way into Sandusky. But he didn't, so I pulled my guitar out of the back seat and played some Mexican songs, while the blackbirds swooped and ascended over the harvest fields, and while my father watched the white highway line into Clyde. Damn it, Sherwood, this is my country, too. You and my father cannot have it all. Like you, I know the look of ponds at sunset on the edges of small Ohio towns. County fairs are more real to me than art galleries or seminar rooms. I, too, have smoked corn silk in cool, dark barns. I have been a poor boy with a newspaper route. I have heard the old veterans spitting and droning around a pot-bellied stove in the general store. I, too, had a gentle, weary mother who died young. Let me in, Sherwood. Let me in, Father. All three of us have whooped drunkenly in village streets through the sexual explosion of Ohio spring. Let me in. We went fishing, my father and I, in Sandusky Bay. It's a fine place, Sherwood, as you must recall, but not as quiet and rural as when you and Doc Reefy sat there on summer afternoons. There are rows of cottages now, filling stations and a beer tavern or two. The city people have found it. Their harsh voices and loud radios hang in the summer air. But the fish are still there, bass and perch and sheephead. And if you go out into the bay with a boat, all the shore noises fade away, and you can be alone with the lake and the sun and the shoreline. I wanted to bring some beer, but my father thinks I drink too much. I do. So we took water instead. I think it made him happy that I fished with him that afternoon. Suddenly, coming back to shore, I wanted to weep for whatever it was that my father and I had never shared. But of course I didn't, and we drove back to Continental in the dark. So I am sitting here, Sherwood, 2 seasons later, in surroundings that you would recognize at once. A shabby room in a strange city, far away from Clyde or Sandusky or Continental. There are no harvest fields, no blackbirds outside my window. I am 35 years old, a shaggy man at a typewriter. Half his life behind him. I write poems, or try to. People in Ohio think it's a fantastic way of life, and I suppose it is. Like you, I have no regrets for having abandoned all those fine abstractions, marriage, success, prestige, security, for the solid meat of things. Words, trees, women's lips, flowers, grime, leaky commodes, gas burners, the cold asphalt of night streets. No, I am simply here, a live man in the realest of all possible worlds. But this is not what I started out to say, Sherwood. What I want to know, Sherwood, if you can hear me sitting up there at some celestial trotting race, or loafing in some heavenly harness shop or pool room, or doing whatever it is the saintly dead riders might find to do in heaven, what I'd like to know, Sherwood, is who my father is. Are you my father? Is he my father? Is God my father? Send me a message, Sherwood.
Hi, I'm Mary Martin, director of the Ireland Library on the South Campus. And the poem I have today to read for you is by Catherine DeVinck, and the title is John at Patmos. And the title comes from an inspiration of a line of scripture from the book of Revelation, and this is the line: "There was silence in heaven." And John, the evangelist, was banished to the island of Patmos in 96, the year 96 of the Common Era. And he wrote the book of Revelations from the Greek island, Patmos. And I love this poem because of the play on words. It talks about words and then the word. And I first heard this poem when I was on retreat 2 years ago at the Easter time. So the end of the poem speaks of the beauty of this season and the beauty of springtime. John at Patmos. Words began to fly early, their wings black, each feather an iron shaft, shot through the morning sun. They entered the city, roosted on chimney and bedpost, perched on cathedral and shop, sounding themselves into lectures, seminars, arguments, and spats. People walked the streets, dressed in skin and cloak, printed with all manner of names. Words mated, multiplied, infested every house, every room. Some were killed by hunters, guardians of the city halls. Others collapsed, were caught, eaten innocently to fatten further speech. They cried out, they shouted. They fell into whispers to soar again, to bring forth new generations of noises. They entered drain pipes and arteries, clogged sewers and tear ducts. There were so enormously many, the city swelled, burst forth into a great black scream. I send you one word. It spells silence, nakedness. It says peel the shifting layers, push away the choking weights. Go to quiet, hidden places where you can hear the earth moved by worm and mole, lifted by green muscles of new plants. Gather the silence around you. A downy cloth hanging loose, hardly touching the bruised flesh. Enter silence. Stretch yourself through it. Leap free.
Hi, I'm Jim Rogers from the Center for Irish Studies here, and I'm going to read a poem by the translation from Anton O'Raftery, Blind Raftery, an Irish language poet who wrote in the late 18th century, early 19th century, translated by a fairly minor poet, Paddy Fallon, in the 20th century poet. And apparently Fallon was completely untroubled in the course of translating by the fact that he didn't speak the language he was translating from. So it's an ashling. That word turns up in the poem. It's an Irish tradition of poems about a woman you can never have, or unrequited love. You have to, I think it's, I've read this poem first 25 years ago, and there's something wonderful about it. And you have to imagine Raftery blind, remember the blind man writing this, blind, standing in the rain, singing to empty pockets, as he said. Mary Hynes. That Sunday, on my oath, the rain was a heavy overcoat on a poor poet, and when the rain began in fleeces of water to buck-leap like a goat, I was only a walking penance reaching Kiltartan. And there, so suddenly that my cold spine broke out on the arch of my back in a rainbow, this woman surged out of the day with so much sunlight I was nailed there like a scarecrow. But I found my tongue and the breath to balance it, and I said, "If I bow to you with this hump of rain, I'll fall on my collarbone, but look, I'll chance it, and after falling, bow again." She laughed. She was gracious, and softly she said to me, "For all your lovely talking, I go marketing with an ass. I'm no hill queen, alas, or Ireland, that grass widow. So hurry on, sweet Raftery, or you'll keep me late for Mass. The parish priest has blamed me for missing second Mass, and the bell talking on the rope of the steeple, but the tonsure of the poet is the bright crash of love that blinds the irons on his belfry. Were I making an ashling, I'd tell the tale of her hair, but now I've grown careful of my listeners, so I pass over one long day in the rainy air where we sheltered in whispers. When we left the dark evening at last outside her door, she lighted a lamp, though a gaming company could have sighted each trump by the light of her unshawled pall, and indeed she welcomed me with a big quart bottle, and I mooned there over glasses till she took that bird the phoenix from the spit. "And Raftery," says she, "a feast is no bad dowry. Sit down now and taste it." If I praised Ballylee before, it was only for the mountains where I broke horses and ran wild, and not for its 7 crooked smoky houses where 7 crones are tied all day to the listening top of a half-door, and nothing to be seen or heard or seen, but the drowsy dropping of water and a gander on the green. But boys, I was blind as a kitten till last Sunday. This town is earth's very navel. 7 palaces are thatched there of a Monday, and oh, the 7 queens, whose pale, proud faces, with their 7 glimmering sisters, the Pleiads, light the evening where they stroll, and one can find the well by their wet footprints, and make one's soul, for Mary Hynes, rising, gathers up there her ripening body from all the love stories, and rinsing herself at morning shakes her hair and stirs the old gay books in libraries. And what shall I do with sweet Boccaccio? And shall I send Ovid back to school again, with a new headline for his copybook and a new pane? Like a nun, she will play you a sweet tune on a spinet, and from such grasshopper music leap like Herod's hussy who fancy the saint's head for grace after meat. Yet she'll peg out a line of clothes on a windy morning and by noonday put them ironed in the chest. And you'd swear by her white fingers she does nothing but take her fill of rest. And I'll wager, now that my song is ended, Loughrea, that old dead city where the weavers have pined at the mouldering looms since Helen broke the thread, will be piled again with silver fleeces. Oh, the new coats and big horses, the raving and the ribbons and Ballylee and hubbub in uproar, and may Raftery be dead if he's not there to ruffle it with his own mare, Shank's mare, that never needs a spur. But sweet light, though your face coins my heart's very metals, isn't it folly without pardon for Raftery to sing, so that men east and west come spying on your vegetable garden? We could be so quiet in your chimney corner, yet how could a poet hold you, any more than the sun, burning in the big, bright, hazy heart of harvest, could be tied in a hen run? Bless your poet then, and let him go. He'll never stack a haggard with his breath. His thatch of words will not keep rain or snow out of the house, or keep back death. But Raftery rising, curse as he sees you, stir the fire and wash Delft, that he was bred a poet, whose selfish trait it is to keep no beauty to himself.
I'm John Burke. I work at the Computer Center.
Hi, I'm Heid
Erdrich from the English department, and we chose a poet together who is not our individual favorite poet, but our favorite poet as a married couple. We chose E. Cummings because there are a lot of poems that are not exactly in two voices, but if you remember how Cummings looks on the page, there are a lot of parentheses. So today I will be the voice of the parenthetical parts of E. Cummings, and John will read the rest. We're doing two poems. The first poem is a sort of incomprehensible cosmic Cummings that John will explain to anybody who asks afterwards. And the other one is a love poem.
Which we both love. Space being...
Don't forget to remember.
Curved. Space being...
Don't forget to remember.
Curved.
And that reminds me, who said, oh yes, frost, something there is that isn't fond of walls?
An electromagnetic...
No, I've lost the...
Einstein expanded Newton's laws preserved continuum.
But we read that before.
Of course, life being just a reflex, you know, since everything is relative, or, to sum it all up, God being dead.
Not to mention interred.
Long live that upward-looking, serene, illustrious, and beatific Lord of creation, man, at a least crooking of whose compassionate digit Earth's most terrific quadruped swoons into billiard balls.
And you know what that one means?
Okay. This one is called I Carry Your Heart. I carry your heart with me.
I carry it in my heart.
I am never without it.
Anywhere I go, you go, my dear, and whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling.
I fear no fate.
For you are my fate, my sweet.
I want no world.
For beautiful you are my world, my true.
And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows.
Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide.
And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart.
I carry it in my heart.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Doku, and I'm working with the student department. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a student. I'm a senior. But I don't know. I'm the last person, so I had to tell people here, Dan. One thing I want to say, though, I want to thank Julie back there and all the people that put this event together. It's been great, and they know that we've been pampering her with all the emails and phone calls with asking about all this information about this event. So thanks, Julie. And the other thing too, I want to thank all of you, the readers and the audience, for participating with this event, and we appreciate you also. Why don't we all give each other a round of applause for that? I'm guessing I'm the last person, so what do we have till about 1 o'clock? You want me to go until then? No, I'm just kidding. All right, one thing, let me tell you briefly about this book that it's called Poems That Touch the Heart. And the story behind that is 4 years ago I found that it's in the recycle bins. You know, I didn't can afford a college student to buy the book, so I'm just going to, and I don't know if you're the owner of the book out there, I might want to give back to you, or if you know the owner of the book, because I haven't been to find one yet. But it served me really well in the last 4 years here at St. Thomas, especially when I have a day or a week. There's so much things going on that I may pick up and try to read a little about that, and maybe give me some more thoughts and focus about what I want to do with my life, things like that. And especially being a senior now and graduating in about 3 weeks, and kind of scary thought for myself, and I'm sure for a lot of seniors out there too. And I hope that the poem I'm about to read maybe give you a little more inspiration about your life and your career. And I hope that you will go down your life path with passion and love and courage. The title of the book I will read is called The Dreams Ahead by Edwin Colley Lissy. What would we do in this world of ours? Who is it not for the dreams ahead? For thorns are mixed with the blooming flowers. no matter which path we tread. And each of us has his golden goal, stretching far into the years. And ever he climbs with a hopeful soul, with alternate smiles and tears. That dreams is what holds him up through the storms of ceaseless fight, when his lips are pressed to the warm goose cup, and clouds shut out the light. To some is a dream of high estate. To some is a dream of wealth. To some is a dream of a truce with fate, in a constant search for health. To some is a dream of home and spouse. To some is a crown above. The dreams ahead are what make each life. The dreams and faith and hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks everybody who read today. I was just thinking it's sort of like one of those potluck meals, where you don't tell people what to bring, but it all turns out exactly right. You have exactly the right mix of food. So thanks for proving that Americans do have favorite poems. We'll see you again next year.